What if I told you the catastrophic floods drowning Sudan right now aren't just a natural disaster? What if they were actually the opening moves in a hydrological war that was planned in Israeli intelligence centers 6 decades ago? And what if every devastating wave crashing through Sudanese villages was predicted by Egyptian strategists back when your grandparents were young? This is War Mind. And today we're exposing one of the most sophisticated resource wars ever conceived, a conflict where water has become a weapon, dams have become battleships, and an entire nation's survival hangs in the balance. Subscribe to War Mind and prepare to see international conflict through an entirely new lens. The images are heartbreaking: families clinging to rooftops, ancient villages submerged, 58 souls lost to raging waters, 150,000 people displaced from their homes. But look closer, past the surface of this humanitarian crisis, and you'll see something far more sinister at work. This isn't just water. This is geopolitical warfare flowing at 750 million cubic meters per day. This is Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam unleashing a calculated deluge, opening emergency gates with no warning, turning Sudan's riverbanks into front lines in a hidden war. But here's what makes this story truly terrifying. The dam that's causing all this destruction, it's not even working. Satellite intelligence reveals a stunning truth. Those massive turbines that were supposed to generate electricity for millions, they're silent. The power generation channels, dry as bone, after billions spent and years of construction. This engineering marvel produces zero electricity. So we have to ask the dangerous question: if it's not for power, what is this dam really for? The answer will take us down a rabbit hole of declassified documents, hidden alliances, and a geopolitical chess game that began in 1963. That's when American engineers from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation first drew up blueprints for a massive dam on the Blue Nile. Their explicit objective, stated in internal memos, to create hydrological leverage over Egypt, to give Ethiopia, and by extension its allies, the ultimate weapon control over life itself in the Nile Valley. But the Americans weren't working alone. Buried in those same documents are references to regional partners with specific hydrological interests. It doesn't take an intelligence analyst to read between those lines. The trail leads directly to Tel Aviv, and to a relationship between Israel and Ethiopia that's deeper and darker than most realize. Since the 1950s, while the world was watching the Suez Crisis and the Arab-Israeli conflicts, Mossad agents were quietly building a different kind of empire in the Ethiopian highlands. They came not with tanks, but with agricultural experts, not with fighter jets, but with irrigation engineers. Israeli advisors established massive farming colonies across Ethiopia, 50,000 hectares of prime agricultural land, all irrigated by rivers that feed directly into the Nile. They called it agricultural development. But look at the map, and you'll see the strategic genius. They were learning to control the Nile at its source. The vision for this water war didn't begin in some dark intelligence briefing room. It started with the very founders of political Zionism, Theodor Herzl. In his 1902 novel Alt New Land, described a future where water from the Nile would flow to Palestine. He wasn't just dreaming, he was planning. He even approached the Egyptian government with a formal proposal. Give us in concession to settle in Sinai, and we'll build a pipeline to bring Nile water to Tel Aviv. But Herzl was just the beginning. Fast forward to Golda Meir in the 1960s, who famously told her cabinet that with strong alliances in Turkey and Ethiopia, Israel would control the headwaters of both the Tigris-Euphrates and the Nile, the two great river systems that have sustained Middle Eastern civilizations for millennia. Now, consider what's happening today. As we speak, Ethiopia is completing the final filling of the Grand Renaissance Dam. They're opening emergency gates, flooding Sudan, and creating a humanitarian crisis that pressures Egypt from its southern flank. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. This is exactly why we dedicate ourselves to investigating these hidden conflicts. The real wars of the 21st century aren't being fought with traditional weapons. They're being fought with economic pressure, with cyber attacks, and with control over essential resources like water. If you want to understand the true forces shaping our world, hit that like button and subscribe. We break down these complex geopolitical games every week. Let's look at the evidence piling up. Israeli agricultural companies control vast territories in Ethiopia's most hydrologically sensitive regions. Israeli intelligence has deep penetration in Ethiopian security agencies. Israeli engineers have consulted on the dam project from its earliest stages. And now, with Sudan collapsing into civil war and Egypt facing unprecedented economic pressure, the pieces are falling into place exactly as those 1960s documents predicted. But here's what they didn't anticipate: Egyptian resilience. While Ethiopia was building its dam, Egypt was building its defenses. The Aswan High Dam, once criticized as an environmental mistake, has become the nation's shield. As flood waters rage downstream, Egypt's reservoirs are absorbing the shock, buying time, proving that foresight and preparation can counter even the most sophisticated hydrological warfare. The question now isn't whether this water war is real. The evidence is overwhelming. The real question is, what happens next? Does Egypt continue to play defense? Or does it take the fight to the diplomatic or potentially military arena? How does Sudan recover from being the battlefield in a conflict it never asked for? And what role will other global powers like China and Russia play as they watch American and Israeli proxies battle for control of the world's longest river? This isn't just about water. This is about survival. This is about sovereignty. This is about whether nations can be held hostage by controlling the resources that keep their people alive. When you see those flood waters in Sudan, remember what you've learned today. Remember that sometimes the most devastating weapons don't make a sound when they're fired. Sometimes they flow silently, gathering force in mountain reservoirs, waiting for the moment when someone opens a gate and changes the course of history. Thanks for watching War Mind. History isn't just about dates and places, it's about understanding the hidden battles that determine which civilizations survive and which become footnotes in someone else's story.